New performance numbers for the RTX 50 series, where does it rank against the 40 series? New performance numbers for the RX 9070 XT, where is that going to slot in and how much is it going to cost? And where's FSR 4 going to come in versus DLSS? Welcome back to PC Builder, I'm Jason. This is our January Q&A. We're talking about those new GPUs and all of your building questions and more. Remember, if you get value out of this video, please give it a like. This makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows licenses and that terrible Activate Windows watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key and get a Windows 10 or 11 OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 30% off during their Black Friday sale. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! Windows is fully licensed for a crazy low price. And Windows 10 can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. And they have Microsoft Office licenses too. Use the links in the video description. Let's talk a little bit about the RTX 50 series performance. What else? That's what Wyatt wants to know. He's asking, is the 50 series even going to be worth it? Of course, I'm sure most content creators are people that can afford it will get the 5090, and it's going to be at least a little bit better than the 4090. It will definitely be better than the 4090. However, unless you want AI frames, the 50 series just doesn't seem like it's worth it to him for the mid-range budget. I did a whole video on the fake frames, multi-frame generation. I'll just leave a link to that down in the video description. I actually went quite viral around it. A lot of concerns I've had over the years about fake frames now being represented as FPS, but I want to separate that out from right now. We just want to focus in on rasterized performance. And the reason I want to focus in on rasterized performance, NVIDIA just released more information. Let's go over to video cards. They've formatted the data really nicely, but these are all from NVIDIA's website. They've released additional performance slides that show some new games that are not using DLSS for multi-frame generation. That was the thing that I was having a problem with. Those are not real frames. Those are AI interpolated frames. Watch my other video for what the difference is. So let's focus in on just what we think will likely be rasterized performance. There is some upscaling in this data as well. But if you take a look at it, basically all the various new games that they're showing, it feels like they're trying to lower expectations for the 50 series. That whole 5070 is a 4090 thing.
RTX 5070. 4090 performance.
Really did not hit well with a lot of gamers, and they're getting a lot of pushback on that. And that's why I think they're kind of coming back to reality a little bit here. Now, they made the big BS claim on stage, and now they're trying to walk it back a little bit. So somebody else went through on the games that did not use multi-frame generation, and they're like, okay, well, if we compared this versus the previous series, what kind of performance uplift would we expect? And they were finding that for like the 5070, versus a 4070, it's about 20%. Now remember, 4070 was not a card people were super happy with. It was kind of a disappointing card. The 5070 Ti versus the 4070 Ti, about 20%. And then 15%, the 4080, not even the 4080 Super versus the 5080. That's kind of, but 33%, 5090 versus 4090, which sounds like a pretty good uplift. So I went ahead and put together a chart. Let's just take a look at my chart. Based on kind of an amalgamation of data from TechSpot, Tom's Hardware, Tech Power Up, you can read the note at the bottom, for the various reviews in the past. This is the one that we use for our monthly GPU market update in terms of FPS performance at 1440p. I will note some of the data in here is possibly ray trace. So again, we're just using this as kind of to get a gauge. Don't pin any of this data down for the new cards to like the exact FPS that you're going to get. And obviously, depending on the settings of the games and everything you use, it's going to differ widely in what games you use, right? But let's start off with the RTX 5090. 253 average FPS if we just apply a 33% uplift to the RTX 4090. So it's 33% faster. It would become the de facto fastest card in the universe, basically. And I think people would generally be happy with that. If you're interested, like what was the previous generation? Let's just take a look real quick. This is the Tech Power Up GPU database. So if we just jump in here and we look at the RTX 3090 Ti, and we look at the uplift to the 4090, it's 41%. It's right there. It's 41%. That's not bad. If you look at the 3090, it's like 60 something. It's a lot bigger. But obviously, if we go with the fastest card from the 30 series, which is the 3090 Ti, to the fastest card from the 40 series, the 4090, it was a 41% uplift. So it would undershoot the uplift we got from 30 series to 40 series, but I don't think 33% is bad. I don't think that's bad. And again, don't pin these numbers down too hard just yet. Although this is using the data that NVIDIA is supplying, but these are selective. They cherry pick, so just take this with a grain of salt. I actually think that's pretty good. Let's talk about where it kind of starts to feel like it falls off a cliff. The RTX 5080, 172 average FPS, barely beats the 7900 XTX, and it's not that much higher than the 4080 Super. Now remember, the 4080 Super is faster than the 4080. I didn't have a 4080 on here, so I just adjusted the data for the 4080 Super basically. So it's less than that, I think it was, what'd they say, 11% uplift here? This 15% uplift. So it's less than the 15% uplift, and you can see it right here, and it's not that impressive. It's still $999. That's not bad. It's still pretty decent price performance, but it does not beat the 4090. And I think a lot of people were expecting it to beat the 4090, but that is also very much in line with the US AI export ban to China right now. They can't sell the 4090 into China. They want a high-end GPU that they can sell into the Chinese market. So it's looking more like it's the 4090D version, the 4090 Dragon version, which they do sell into the Chinese market. That's the 5080. So in many ways, I feel like the 5080 has been artificially limited by geopolitical concerns. It's crazy, right? That's probably why the 5080 is that cut down. And we've talked about before, it has half the amount of CUDA cores as the 5090. We've never seen an 80 series card that's been cut down that heavily from the 90 series card. So that's kind of crazy. Again, just barely beats the 7900 XTX and 4080 Super. Although I will say the 5080, there's some ray traced in there. The 7900 XTX, that's rasterization, obviously does not perform as well in ray tracing, depending on how important ray tracing is for you. We look at the 5070 Ti. Again, it's faster-ish than the 7900 XT, actually pretty good size faster. And then if you look at the 4080 Super, comes in just below the 4080 Super. The 5070, I think, is the one that's really going to disappoint people. It's only as fast as a 4070 Super, basically. It's roughly the same performance as a 4070 Super. And again, don't get overly focused on, oh, it's 123.8 FPS. There's probably a give and take in here of quite a bit, and we'll get those third-party benchmarks. But I think that's where people might be a little disappointed in terms of the uplift. Is the 5070 Ti, again, once again, the 70 Ti Super was the good card from last generation. That was the 80 class, as I called it last generation. The 5070 Ti feels like it's going to be our 80 class card. For this generation at $749, it's going to give you quite a bit of that uplift, and 5080 is not that much faster than it. It's like a third the price for only a little bit more uplift. We are going to get third-party benchmarks in here, so we won't have to read the cloud signals and the tea leaves for much longer. All right, James Russo says it's sounding like this. 9070 XT and the 9070 are going to be true 5070 and 5070 Ti competitors, 4080 and 4070 Ti Super performance levels. If this ends up being the case, how much do you think they need to be priced at for AMD to truly gain market share? And then Carlos has basically kind of a similar question out there. And then we've also got Bobo who says, what's the estimated price for the 9070? So let's jump in first to the performance, because guess what? We also got new leaks in this case. And AMD did make some statements about the 9070 XT at Computex, which we were at Computex. We were able to check out a lot of the 9070 XTs and the other GPUs as well, like the 5090 and everything. They look really cool, but what are we talking about in terms of performance? Well, it also happens that there were leaks around the 9070 XT, and Frank Zor, who works for AMD, said that none of the leaks that you'd seen up to that point have really pinpointed the 9070 XT's actual performance, hinting that it was considerably faster than what we thought. Well, then we got these leaks just recently from the Chip Hell forums, basically, on two games, Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing, and then Black Myth Wukong without ray tracing. So this is basically saying that it's 95% as fast in Black Myth Wukong at 1440p as a 4080 Super, and it's 80% as fast as the 4080 Super when you add in ray tracing. So basically, it's giving it 4070 Ti Super-like performance in ray tracing, and then faster in rasterization than the 4070 Ti Super. So if we go back, we add that into the graph, look at that. There's the 9070 XT 16 gigabyte performing almost identically to the 7900 XT 20 gigabyte. Now again, the 9070 XT would now include some data that is ray tracing, pretty heavy ray tracing at that. Whereas the 7900 XT, that is entirely rasterized performance. So basically the 9070 XT, as you can see, performs almost identically to the 4070 Ti Super in terms of its ray tracing performance, and is slightly faster in rasterization. And again, I just want to emphasize, we're guesstimating at these based on leaks and rumors, so the actual performance will probably bounce around quite a bit. We will get third-party benchmarks, and AMD will probably make some specific performance claims when they decide to give us the rest of the details. If you watched our 9070 XT revealed video, we gave you all the information that they gave us at the time, but they didn't make any performance claims, and they said that, well, they're waiting for some future announcement to give us all those details. So we'll have to wait and see. But if it's basically the same as a 7900 XT, which I think would be pretty good in terms of performance, especially if it adds in the ray tracing in addition to the rasterization performance. Although I think if you watch my videos, I don't love ray tracing. We've polled y'all continuously on ray tracing. Only a handful of you are really that focused on ray tracing. And we've made recommendations in the past of specific NVIDIA cards to get if you are a ray tracing enthusiast. But the 9070 XT could become your card to get. That being said, it's slightly slower than the 5070 Ti, which is priced at $749. It would beat the 5070 pretty handily here. So what would it need to be priced at? So then we look back in time. Okay, well, if you're gonna give me 7900 XT levels of performance, which kind of aligns with the slide that AMD did show, they sent to us ahead of the 9070 XT announcement, or at least teaser. This is what the 7900 XT was selling for on October Prime Day, 619, let's just call it 620 bucks because it's easier to say, with 2 free games. And this was a pretty good model. This was the ASRock Phantom Gaming model, a nicer model. And we all know Space Marine 2 was an excellent game. Even if we just forget the other game and just focus on that, that was like a, $60, $70 value. So if we took 70 bucks. So basically this is like a $550 GPU, if I'm doing the math right. This was an insane deal. And that's why I said you got to buy this at the time. If we're getting this, except now also the ray tracing level is the same as the rasterization, which would be great. I don't know what to tell you. I really think they got to hit 449. I said this in my release video. I think they're going to try and get away with 499. I think they got to hit 449. Now, to me, AMD has to come at this as though they have zero market share, because effectively, with it like 15, 16% right now, they have effectively zero in a lot of ways. Instead of approaching this like they have 30 or 40% market share and they're just introducing this and it can be a value thing and they can kind of grind over time, they have to approach this as though they are a new entrant to the market if they actually want to win market share from it. And to do that, they need a disruptive price. I know I'm talking like economic terms here, but they need a market disruptor, not just a better value. So this has to be a market disruptor. I think $449 at least makes this a market disruptor. $399, and again, I have no idea what it costs them to manufacture a 9070 XT. I hope that they figure out how to do it super cheap, because I would sell that thing as cheap as I could and they're buying market share. The problem is in previous generations is they've come and their margins have been okay on each card. But what they've done is they've basically sacrificed their market share in order to maintain those margins. And you can only eat into that for so long. They basically have traded market share for short-term profit, and they're gonna have to give some of that back. Anybody who plays a city builder game or any kind of resource-based game knows at some point you gotta kind of start making some adjustments. So I would go $449, I'd go $399 if they could. That's just me spitballing here. We're going to actually get a price from them very soon. Zinalom asked, do I think AMD is going to release other cards later on, like a 9090 XTX or equivalent? No, in fact, they are not going to in this generation. I don't know if they'll use the name 9090 XTX. They were going to. That was the original plan for RDNA 4, was to have higher end GPUs that used a multi-chip module the same way the 7900 XTX and XT do, but they just couldn't get it working to the point where they felt good about going to production with it. Obviously, they had some problems with it. And in fact, we even heard back in November, at the end of November, that AMD is going to ditch RDNA 5, the next generation. They're just getting rid of it, and they're moving to UDNA, a unified architecture for their AI processing and their GPU architecture. So they're going to merge those together in order to accelerate their development. And that's after we heard that they canceled cards like potentially a 9090 XTX, that they would accelerate development of RDNA 5. Now it seems that they've completely scrapped RDNA 5 as well, and they're just going for this UDNA. So what does that bode for anything? I have no idea, but I would expect the 9070 XT to essentially be the highest end card we see from AMD in the next year and a half. Now, they might surprise us. They might have some kind of golden yields out of the 9070 XTs. Maybe we'll get a 9075 XT. I don't know how they're going to do it with this new naming scheme, but maybe they'll have a slightly faster card, but I think this is probably going to be the top end. All right, Donkey Kong. I love the name, by the way. For a person that hasn't experienced DLSS or FSR, where have you been the last couple of years, man? Do I think the 9070 XT with the new FSR 4 is going to offer a good enough experience so you don't feel like you're missing out on DLSS? And we're not talking about, I get it, you're not talking about frame generation here. We're just talking about the upscaling. Yeah, upscaling I think is great. I've come around to upscaling. Initially, I was highly skeptical of it, but over time, the technology improved to the to the point where the frames looked great. The frames actually look really good. I mostly game at 4K right now on a 7900 XT and an RTX 4090. And so I get to play games where I can compare DLSS and FSR, the current iteration of FSR, which is a software-based solution where DLSS is actually a hardware-based solution. And I've said repeatedly that FSR will never get to the level of DLSS, software versus hardware, unless it goes to a hardware solution. That being said, I will say that when I'm playing a game, I've been playing, I hurt my arm, so I've been limited in the games I can play, but I started playing Frostpunk 2. I don't really notice between the 7900 XT and here using FSR and DLSS on my RTX 4090, I don't notice any image quality issues. Now I'm using upscaling on the quality level. I'm not using performance or anything like that. I'm using, I think ultimate quality is the setting I've got it at on both DLSS and FSR. I don't notice any image quality differences playing in here versus out there. Obviously I notice a slightly higher frame rate out there because it's an RTX 4090 versus a 7900 XT. But we're specifically talking about DLSS versus the current iteration of FSR. FSR 4 we got to see at CES in Las Vegas, and man, it looks good. Now you would expect it to be good because they're moving from a relatively mature software-based solution, and now they're adding in the AI upscaling on it. I'm sure there will be some bugs to iron out that people will make videos on. Oh my God, there's a bug here, but it looks really good. We played Ratchet & Clank side by side. They were using the performance mode, not the quality mode. So they were using a 1080p image upscaled to 4K rather than 1440p. I wouldn't recommend the settings that they were using. They were just trying to highlight like, oh, look how bad it can be over here. But look, even on a setting we wouldn't normally recommend, it looks pretty dang good. And they were right. It looked pretty dang good. So I think FSR 4 looks fantastic. I understand that they're leveraging technology that really only exists on the 9070 XT. But when we sat down with AMD, I said, hey, whatever you can do to get this working on the 7000 series, I think you should do that. And they seemed receptive to it. No promises were made or anything like that. Of course, they just seemed receptive at the time. And I think that might be the case, that they'll find a way to at least leverage whatever they can on the 7000 series to get DLSS 4 working. But I will say, I don't notice any difference right now between DLSS and FSR. I'm not saying there's no difference. I'm saying I can't notice the difference while I'm gaming. Of course, you slow it down, you blow it up to 300%. You can see that DLSS is technically the better technology, and it will always be the better technology while it's using hardware versus a software solution. That's always going to be the case. I don't notice the difference between DLSS and FSR. I know at 1440p, at 1080p, the upscalers start to struggle more because the image that they're using is lower and lower quality. But I wouldn't really worry about FSR anymore in terms of a feature. I think FSR 4 is going to be great. John Locke asks, can we have more of your cats as memes in your video? They're so cute. Well, here's one of them right here. This is Mr. Bear. Viewers of the channel know him really well. He loves to sit here in front of, there's a monitor in front of me, the camera here, but he loves being here. He often likes to get up and like stand in front of the camera when he's mad at me, and he won't let me film. He actually knows how that works. No, Mr. Bear, you can't do it right now. You can't do it right now. He's going to be crazy cat. This is normally his time to go outside. I shouldn't even use that word right now because he knows what that means. Yes, we absolutely love him in the videos. He basically builds all the PCs. He wants to play right now. He basically builds all the PCs. I just work here basically. He's hired me. And then we also have two newer cats. We have Waffles and Lisa, and I'm sure my wife will insert some videos of both Waffles and Lisa here. Lisa's gotten really involved. Waffles just likes to sit in the window, thing over here. Yeah, somebody wants to play. Somebody wants to go out right now. But we try and get them involved as much as we can. While it's cold and we've got them indoors, this is a great time. When it gets warm, they kind of just want to be in the window and stuff. So Mr. Bear feels like just destroying everything right now. But Mr. Bear's a great cat and everybody loves him. Remember, if you got value out of this video, please give it a like. So it makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here who's running away from me. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. Hey, by the way, did you check out our look at fake frames from NVIDIA? Check this video out right here. We go through everything, all the controversy. Check it out, and we'll catch you on the next one.